Hi everyone, welcome back to Homegrown Passion. Today I am going to be planting my tomato plants here that I started, let's see, when did I start these? September 16th, and today's the 22nd of October, so I want to get these guys in the beetle buckets because they're just perfect to put in there and I shouldn't stunt them. There's been times in the past where I've waited too long to put my tomatoes into the beetle buckets and they get really root bound, and when you go to pull them out of the trays here, you rip off a bunch of the roots and it really stunts the plant. So it's a really good idea to put everything in when it's at its perfect size, and I think these guys are at the perfect size. First thing we're going to do is put the beetle buckets in place, get the elbows in them, and then we're going to fill them up with the vermiculite and perlite. Oops. As you can see, I've been staggering the buckets back and forth, and the reason is that you have more room in between each bucket, and then when you go to lean and lower the tomato plants, these buckets on this side, the stems are going to go that way, and then the buckets on this side, they're going to go down this way. So these buckets, I've had them for 9 years now. So every year I go ahead and wash them out with a little dish soap and scrub them, and then sanitize them with a diluted bleach solution. So here are all the elbows I pulled out from last time that we used them. They're all washed and sanitized again. Every once in a while I do lose them when I dump out the stuff, but I've been trying to be real careful of making sure I pull it out when I throw out the growing medium. So the elbows are both the same. We got the little beetle on them there, but you have to put them together. So they just kind of snap together, and then they go ahead into the bucket here so you don't overflow it with water. So I'm going to go down through the whole line and put these in. So when we first started the greenhouse, we didn't have the lights here. So I didn't start my tomato crops I didn't plant the seeds until the end of December, and I wouldn't get them into the beetle buckets until February because you want the days to be longer and the light to get more so the tomato plants would grow. But now that I have the lights, I'd like to have a winter crop here, so that's why I started them so early this year. Now that I have the elbows into the beetle buckets, it's time to put the growing medium into the buckets. The way I've been doing it for the past couple of years, and it's worked really well for me, is I put a layer of perlite, and then a layer of vermiculite, and then another layer of perlite. And the reason I put the vermiculite in the middle, in the middle section of it, is it keeps the moisture in there, and it keeps the roots in the middle of the bucket, because there's so many times in the years past that if it dries out, the roots end up in the return lines and clog everything up. So I try to keep them inside the bucket here, and with the vermiculite holding more moisture, it does work. So putting in the perlite and the vermiculite is a very dusty procedure. I always wear my P100 mask, and I make sure I have all my exhaust fans on, even if it's cold out, to pull all the dust out of here. And then once I'm done filling up each of the buckets, I'll let it sit for a little bit and let all the dust settle before I come back in without my mask on, and then I'll wet down each one of the beetle buckets. So right now I am wetting down the growing medium. Make sure I keep the dust down, and it's also easier to plant the tomato plants in here when it's a little bit wet and moist. I'm using regular tap water just to get it wet, and as soon as I get the tomatoes in there, I will put the nutrient lines right to them. So I've learned from years past to make sure you have your nutrient line secured in place before you plant your plants in there, because once you get them in there, it's kind of hard to weave the line back and forth. Doug usually uses twist tie or zip ties. I'm going to go ahead this year and just use some twist ties. A little bit easier to get off at the end of the year. So a lot of growers like to use these styrofoam covers that fit onto the betel buckets here. I've used them in the years past, but I really haven't seen that much difference, and sometimes they're a pain. You know, they have a hole here where your plant goes, and then you put your emitters in here. But when you first put your plants in, you want to make sure the emitter is really nice and close to your baby plant, because otherwise their roots aren't big enough to get the water that's coming through. Well, I'm ready to get my tomato plants into the betel buckets here. I just want to go over some of the components that we have here. These lines were brand new last year. We usually get 2 years out of them. I do go through and sanitize everything. So Doug has a T here, and then he has the spaghetti tube with the emitter here to reduce down the pressure. I think it's 1.5 gallons per hour. So it pressurizes the whole system so the water just doesn't come squirting out, and it just kind of drips out for them. And then you have your plant stakes that you put in next to the plants. So I'm going to start off planting this funky looking guy here. And if I've had in the comments in years past, make sure you get all of this down below the growing medium, because this will all be roots and it'll be a nice healthy plant, even though he looks kind of funky right now. So with the medium being nice and wet, I can get my hole in there, get all his roots down there, and get them in. Oops, a little bit more on top of them. There we go. And then you want to make sure, like I said, you get the emitter next to the plant. And if people saw my video in the past when I seeded these are in the rapid rooters, so you can see how nice all the roots have come through them. So once you get the whole row here planted, I'll go ahead and power up the system, get it all pressurized, and I'll go through and make sure each one of these emitters is working correctly. So in the years past, we never had these valves on each one of the lines, because 2 of these lines go to one timer and 2 go onto the other timer. And if I only have one row planted, I have to go through and put the paper clip things on each one of these. So it's so much nicer having valves on the end here. So once we get all the plants in here, we're going to go ahead and drop all the bobbins down. Now these bobbins were left over from last year because I had the cucumbers over here. So we'll make sure they're all in good shape and all cleaned up and get them ready for the tomatoes. So this is it. Got them all in the row here. Really going to take care of these guys this winter super good, because we want to make sure we have really high production, because you know how much tomatoes fetch for you in the winter time. So I hope you guys liked today's video. Like always, leave me questions, comments, and suggestions down below, and we'll see you guys next time.